Okay, we're going to talk about transgenderism today. First, I think we should define our terms, but before we even do that, let's just have like opening statements. We dealt with gender one way for a long time. There were males that were men, females that were women, and there were like a few trans people, but they were not generally accepted. You had sex segregated spaces, sports, locker rooms, bathrooms, all these kinds of spaces.
Can I hold you up? I'm running out of fingers. So Let me respond to what you said. Gender in the past was synonymous with sex. There was no distinction. And now that's a change. And in the past, trans people who did not conform to that difference that we're now making a new word around, were very pushed back against in society. For myself, I would say, and they still are a lot and less than they were. And my position is that I would like us to continue that trend a long ways past where we are now.
And then in the last, I feel like 8 years ago, the moment that things changed was when Bruce Jenner came out as Caitlyn Jenner. It was like overnight, people were just like, yeah, he is she now. Bruce is Caitlyn, got a Woman of the Year award or something like that for bravery or something.
Sure. I see her as brave and heroic, even though I am politically misaligned with her mostly.
Jenner is an interesting person. I recently saw him on a podcast and he was talking to a right winger. He doesn't think that trans male to female should be participating in women's sports, for example.
Okay.
And so he's more moderate than some trans activists.
Yeah. Okay. So on that prompt, I'm going to say, I'm going to leave that one completely to the sporting authorities. When they originally made the classes, they were referring to sex. And now terminology has changed. And there's a big push to sort of back solve this. And I think if there were good reasons for having classes and distinctions, they should evaluate what those reasons are and where those classes should be for the good of the sport and the participants. Make a rule that's specific to the sport. And I bet those dividing lines are completely different depending on the sport. I'm betting in some sports, there's almost no difference. And in other sports, it's night and day.
Well, there's a few sports where it doesn't matter, where it's already sex integrated. Shooting, equestrianism, very, very long distance running.
Yeah.
Women have already been participating with the men because they don't have a disadvantage.
It is my intuition that that list of sports, if well analyzed, would grow, not shrink. I think there's a lot of sports that are separated because of social reasons, wherein the performance is not actually statistically significantly different, where we still have different groups not competing together.
Tennis, soccer, basketball.
Those definitely cater to a specific phenotype, a specific body presentation, each of those. That presentation is way about the difference of the two bell curves.
A body who has gone through testosterone-based puberty, which isn't necessarily a male anymore, shouldn't be competing against people that have not gone through testosterone-based puberty.
In those sports where that's important.
Right, which is virtually all of them.
Well, okay, if it's the majority of them, that's fine, no problem. And you would still agree with me that some sports it matters a lot, some sports it matters a little, and some sports it matters not at all?
Even in sports where you're weight classed, the women would have a really hard time competing against.
If they were doing competing, and if you were trying to compare, then you'd have an offset, you'd have a handicap. Whatever formula makes it fair and good for the sport, fine. I don't want to tie it to people's identities and politics.
Ultimately, what I would ideally like, because I'm a libertarian, is to see a separation of the government from sports.
How's the government in this?
Well, the government, public schools have huge sports systems, colleges that get government money. The government's involved with the sports, Title IX. And then there's the Olympics there's a lot of government funding and rulemaking that goes into sports, and the government grants certain organizations monopolies. You can't have competing sports organizations. Ideally, that's what I would like to see the solution be, so that you can have some communities or individuals signing up for the conservative sports organization and other people signing up for the liberal sports organization that have different
You want
rules.
to introduce politics into sports classes?
Oh, it's already.
What purpose does this serve to separate people into sports categories based on their politics?
Oh, because basically right now it's win lose. Either the conservatives win and transgender people cannot play in women's sports, or conservatives win. Or you're going to have a mismatch of different states having different policies. And then when they come together for national championships, it's going to be a problem. And you're going to have the team that has a trans person on it, and the other team refuses to play them. I mean, it's already political.
I'm lost in cognitive dissonance.
Really?
Yeah, I'm having a really hard time understanding.
I think everyone could get along better if we're free to do our own thing and we're not coerced into
I'm not as free to
one
do my own
system.
thing if I'm in a sport that only has 3 people in it.
Well, you're still free.
Yeah, I'm free to
No one's forcing
I'm free to
you.
waste my time.
Yeah,
But if you
that's
subdivide the
freedom.
sport enough, you kill it.
And that's a free market.
Okay.
That's how businesses work.
Okay, fine. Because I don't care about sports either. You go ahead then.
Okay, so you know what happened with the swimmer? Leah Thomas won the NCAA D1 title, so college swimming. And I'm forgetting the name of the cis woman that was competing against her.
Yes. So a cis woman came in second because a
Right.
trans woman won the match. Go ahead.
And she was speaking at a college, and there
The
was
cis
a
woman was
violent,
speaking at the
yes,
college? Okay.
yes, about how it's not fair that a trans person was allowed
I understand.
to not only compete against them in swimming,
Sure.
but also go into their locker room
Yeah.
and expose his penis to them, and how uncomfortable that was, and how the whole thing was very unfair. And so she has been publicly speaking out about this and going on podcasts and things. And she went to a college to speak about this, and a violent mob attacked her and basically trapped her in a room where she was held hostage.
Wow. So now we have a hostage situation.
Yeah.
You buried the lead on me here.
Riley Gaines threatens legal action after being attacked by trans rights activists during SF state speech.
Sounds like a criminal situation that happened to involve a trans person.
Let's back up and define our terms. We jumped the gun on sports. So what does it mean to be trans?
So trans is, in simple terms, externally not conforming to the traditional gender stereotype.
So is everyone who doesn't conform to their gender stereotype trans?
Someone like you might consider me trans for being like 10 or 20% on the scale away from cis in a few things. And other people would say you have to be at least this far on the scale in order to qualify as trans.
I don't like your definition of trans.
Okay.
Because it sounds like you can trans someone else. Like you can say, oh, you're trans because you're not gender conforming.
No, I'm saying there's an external component. The thing that we call trans is the external unmasking of that internal trans state. There's an internal component and there's an external component. And the argument is that when that external component matches what's going on the internal, they function better, they're happier. That's better for them. That's their argument.
If somebody identifies as trans, I would say that they're trans, whether they are gender conforming or not.
Yes, absolutely. It's an identity thing. I want to believe you about your identity and not argue. I think you are the best source I have for your subjective opinion about yourself.
Big names like Philosophy Tube are arguing that you don't even need to have gender dysphoria to be trans.
I think what they are saying, it shouldn't be an additional boundary to getting medical care that would be available to you if you were presenting with a different condition.
But if you don't have gender dysphoria, then what are you treating?
Well, you're treating gender dysphoria. This is a question of whether you are having to prove it beyond the shadow of a reasonable doubt first, or whether this is a freedom to get a kind of therapy that you think is beneficial to you, will make you happy, and has a low enough side risk factor that it's within your freedom, like getting a tattoo.
So do you think that there's limits? Do you think that there's things that are beyond like getting a tattoo that people shouldn't be allowed to do to themselves, even if they think it'll make them happy?
I can come up with many, many, many medical examples. Yes, absolutely. And in different societies, I see very different lines on that. And I would really invite nuanced discussion on what those lines should be.
I would categorize medical transition with all those other things you're probably thinking about that you,
So
but
let's
also
compare
I'm a
it.
libertarian. So
Let's
when
be,
I say you shouldn't be allowed to, I think you should be free to do so without someone doing violence to you. But I don't think it should be socially accepted. I don't think that the government should pay for it.
for the
Does that make
closest
sense?
possible example, breast augmentation surgery,
Mm-hmm.
because it's part of some trans stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Let's take breast augmentation surgery for a cis female. Tell me about freedoms. Tell me about our need to protect them. Do we
Mm-hmm.
as a society have a need to regulate that activity?
I would discourage a woman from getting a boob job. It's going to decrease her ability to breastfeed her future children. She might be able to, it might cause problems. It can cause other problems down the line. And it's just for looks. And I would discourage that. And I'm glad that the government does not fund breast augmentation
Sure.
surgery.
Unless it is necessary for reconstruction for injuries that were not
Right.
opted into. Let's
Right.
assume,
Something
accident, the normal thing.
something went wrong.
Like smacking a car. That's probably the
Right.
most normal thing.
Yeah,
Uh,
and we use puberty blockers for precocious puberty.
so
Something
far,
went physically wrong.
if I'm talking about breast augmentation surgery in my community, in my society, that's only adults.
Okay, yeah, I agree.
Okay. So for breast augmentation surgery, how much is that a person's freedom? And to what degree should we as a society regulate that activity?
I don't think it should be like illegal, but I'm glad the government doesn't pay for it. I don't want my private insurance to pay for it, and I socially don't approve of it, and I wish it was less normalized.
Okay. In this case, do you approve of the very significant regulations on who, when, how they may perform these surgeries in order to medicine safety? I'm sure there's a whole crapload of ethical considerations. Do you like those? Do you like those boundaries? Do you like those restrictions?
I think that we need an organization that has these kind of regulations in mind for safety, but I don't think that it should be the same organization that throws people in jail for violent crime.
To not have it be a legal restriction, but instead socially give them the side eye.
I had to get into my whole framework
Mhm.
about
I'm here to listen.
voluntary governments. You should have criminal government, commercial government, and social government. So a commercial government would set rules for safety standards, products, handling scams and things of that nature.
Yes.
And if somebody does not follow their safety standards, they would not be
Fraud,
able to do
fraud
business with their
protections
customers.
as well. So not
Right,
only medical, also like contractual,
right,
court,
right. Yes, civil
court,
courts.
tort. What do I say?
Yeah,
Civil. Yeah.
yeah. And so if you went to a doctor that had lost his license
Yes.
according to your commercial government, and you
Yep.
go to swipe your card to pay him, and
Yep.
it would say declined, this person is not in
Right.
network, they've been blacklisted for XYZ. And so you'd be like, oh, well, I'm not going to use this doctor. And then at the social level, would be like churches, mutual aid societies, and more social level things. And
Hmm.
there they would be like, cosmetic surgery is normal to us, or they would be like, this is not normal. We highly discourage it. And there would be different communities with different standards.
If I had wildly different standards from county to county, there would be a whole lot of people commuting to their doctor.
Under my framework, this isn't based on geography.
Oh,
I could be Christian, my neighbor can be Muslim, my other neighbor can be Jewish, my other neighbor can be
how do you
atheist,
define
and we
communities?
all go to different churches or no churches. It's fine. It doesn't matter. It's not a problem because I pay for what I want to pay for and I get those benefits, and
Mm-hmm.
you can pay for what you like. We have different insurance companies, it's fine.
Mm-hmm.
We don't all have to be under the same. I can have a doctor right next to me that's not in my social government, and I drive past him and I go a few more blocks and I go to the one that is.
Okay. So I'm getting that this is communities actually being formed and strongly having different social constraints based upon their political party.
Or, I mean, we wouldn't have political parties because we wouldn't have a coercive government. But yeah, basically,
Right.
like,
Okay. How,
I'm blowing your mind
so
a
these
little
aren't
bit.
political parties, but they are
More like churches.
conservative and liberal and defined along those lines. And what do you call them? How do these social governments interact with each other?
They can, or they can choose not to. Like our sports team is gonna go against your sports team. We'll have a friendly competition, or
A
maybe
sports
they'll be
team is
like,
a social government.
or maybe they'll be like,
Okay.
no, we're too different. We're not going to interact with each other.
I'm expanding government to mean something much more.
Right. As a defined government, so government is an organization that regulates human behavior, and so I'm defining it much more broadly than how we normally think about it, because we normally think of like the
Okay.
police and the military and like you have to do this and you have to do that. But if you conceptualize a government as any organization that regulates human behavior, then a
Sure.
church can be a government.
It seems opt-in. You can opt
Right.
in and out. A person could belong to any number of them as long as they followed for any given category.
I imagine that you would only want to sign up for one because you wouldn't want to have to pay taxes to both. Yeah, you
Well,
got to
I
put
mean,
something in.
Twitter blue check qualifies by your standard now.
Right.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, Elon Musk is the king of Twitter. That is his domain. And when
Yeah.
you go onto his platform, you have to follow his rules and he can ostracize you and kick you out. I imagine a social government being more all encompassing. So they would handle like education, healthcare, welfare system, and it would be like a system. So, like, all those things that we look to government to do that progressive, like Democrats want XYZ and all these things. And
Okay.
Republicans are like, no, that's not the role of government, right?
Mm-hmm.
If people want that from their government, they should be able to go to a government that provides that to them. There would be a bunch of different ones that do things different ways.
Okay. So now there's the government definition one that's usually found in the dictionary. What's the role of that traditional government in relationship to this moral government? So the other one, that doesn't make him immoral government, but whatever.
Yeah.
The amoral government, that's not better.
Locking up peaceful people in prison is not moral.
Locking up nonviolent people is immoral.
That's the whole basis of the whole thing. So then if you think it through and you're like, okay, if we want our government to do XYZ and all these things, but we don't want to break the moral natural law by giving the government the power to coercively tax and lock up peaceful people, then how are we going to get this done? By moral government.
And making up structures and identities and groupings that are strongly exclusive of each other in order that you can enforce to the opt-in group a particular moral code that will make their very narrow part of the world better. Inclusion and polarization of the system that you're providing is the thing that I'm a missionary against.
I think forced unity is tyranny. We need the right to exclude people. If we're being forced to include people and behavior and ideas, then we're going to fight about everything because we're not going to agree. I mean, you could hardly get a husband and wife to agree. How are you going to get a nation of 330 million people to agree on everything? From what's the policy in the school bathrooms and sports to, I mean, everything. You're not going to agree. So you're going to fight about it constantly, and it might spill over into violence. I mean, look at what just happened to Riley Gaines.
Wow. I get this a lot. You're bringing this up, and it could, and then they write me a ridiculous story about how my mentioning a word causes somebody to become radicalized when what I'm doing is expressing the nuanced discussion about that idea.
Well, in reality, we do see this pattern happening over and over again, where there's a war, people fight, people realize that war is hell, and they don't want to fight anymore. They compromise, they find unity,
Yes.
and over time, the differences start building up, and it gets to that point where the people who lose the election are not willing to live under the opposing political party, and they
Yeah.
get violent about it. The next election, it will probably be even worse, I imagine, unless something changes.
Yeah,
But
the trend is bad, no doubt.
and that's one of the big problems with coercive government. The idea of unity sounds nice, but the cost is so high.
I don't need unity, not at all. I really dig on these discussions between adults where we can not come to blows and we can talk about it nuancedly. And I think the solution is there. It's not in unity. It's not in shutting down the conversation. It's about keeping it in an adult space, keeping it peaceful, keeping it kind, keeping it real.
But you don't like the idea of having separate
I don't like
systems.
strong exclusion. I see strong exclusion as a slippery slope leading down to bad things.
I see the opposite.
Okay, and I see how that we could look at the same data and come to a different conclusion.
It takes pressure off.
So I don't want to take pressure off. I want the pressure to be a forcing function, to push you and I into this room where we can look at each other and hear each other and come to a better choice.
If people are so in disagreement about something and they can't find a compromise,
right?
It's better to get divorced than to get violent.
Right, but there's more than two people in the room.
So do you think that if we're kind of forced to deal with each other in this huge group, that we will come to a better conclusion than if we just separate into smaller groups?
Yes, I have much, much history as to the usefulness and reliability of the wisdom of the crowd. It's not perfect, but it's a heck of a lot better than going with your gut for a single person.
It's our freedom to be wrong. I'm okay with people being like, you know what? I don't like the way you guys are doing your thing. We're a community of 200 people. We're going to go over here, do our own thing, test it out. And if they all end up flaming out and it goes terribly, that's their right to do. But if things go well, that's how social cultural evolution happens, is you have those breakaway cults that turn into the next big religion that becomes super popular. And the problem with having such large and controlling governments is that you don't have the freedom to do those breakaway things. It's very, very difficult. I mean, I guess you can sort of, you still have to pay all the taxes to the government and then pay for your own stuff on top of it.
Right.
And it's really hard.
The top government, that definition one government that we were talking about, does not like to share.
Let's get back to trans issues. We're talking about the definition of trans. Do you approve of the idea that there are males and females and that is biological?
I think there are those who can sometime potentially in their life father a child. I think there are those that can sometimes potentially mother a child. And then there are a large number of intersex individuals who are not fertile, and therefore by my categorization, they would be in the neither category. I don't want to put labels on these because people want to argue about the labels.
As long as we have biological males, biological females, the existence of some people that do not have proper reproductive functioning and can't reproduce does not negate the fact that there are males and there are females.
That is such a strong bimodal distribution. Almost everybody falls almost equally in these two buckets over here, and these are the rare exceptions that on my chart.
And now we come to the definition of woman.
Sure.
And man.
Yes. What is your definition of woman?
I want to just keep it the same as it's been, that a woman is a female and a man is a male. Okay. Everyone just uses them interchangeably anyway. That's what they mean.
I have a friend who is physically absolutely as male as I, whom I call a woman. And for clarity, I call a trans woman. Would you agree that my friend is a trans woman?
I don't actually like using the term trans woman, because how can you then say a trans woman isn't a woman? Because you just said the word woman.
Your version of woman is my term, cis woman. If If I needed to be specific because I'm in a doctor's office, I might say, my friend Jamie is going to their doctor who specializes in trans women. And you would not be concerned, you would not be confused at all.
I wouldn't be confused, but
Very
I
good.
think that language does have power and culture. And
Yes,
so we're going to
absolutely.
just kind of automatically think the way
Yes.
that we use the words.
I understand your resistance to calling her a woman. What word would you prefer that I use in referring to Jamie?
Gender confused man.
I will not. I do not think they are gender confused. I would be insulting my friend if I pointed out something that they are trying to mask or de-emphasize. Can you give me another term that I could use that is not trans woman that would not be rude or a slur to my friend?
Trans person.
The extremists on that share most of my alignments, many of them throw paint around very freely, and I'm very annoyed with them. I think they set my position back by giving bad modeling.
Blair White and Caitlyn Jenner are
Okay.
more like moderate trans activists.
Hmm.
And if they were the norm, I think transgender issues would be way more accepted in society. I think because it's gotten so extreme so quickly that the pushback is harder. Caitlyn Jenner is going on Fox News and Blair White is going on like right wing things. And I'm like, no, no, don't. It's just the camel's nose under the tent. You give them an inch, they're gonna take a mile. Oh my god.
Yes, thank you. Yes, yes. We completely agree.
We need Jesus.
Okay. How would Jesus handle this today?
He would say, repent and sin no more.
This is the first reference to anything Bible we've had.
I don't want to use the Bible to justify my political beliefs because not everybody
It
believes in the
informs your
Bible.
political beliefs. I'm interested in the reasons you believe things, not whether
I
I
think
should believe those
I
things.
think I had this opinion before I became Christian.
Still.
I think it's more I became Christian because of this more than the other way around.
Okay, that's fascinating to me.
Did we get our definition of what a woman was?
Mm-hmm. We got your definition of what a woman was. We didn't get to mine, which is just the one you would exactly expect, and that is woman is one who expresses the feminine gender publicly and wants you to treat her as such publicly, and will certainly add the word trans or MTF or any of those other things to it in the contexts where that should matter. At the DMV is not one of those contexts. If you're pulled over as a trans woman, you should be treated in every way as a woman, and your transness should not be noticed or commented on.
What if you're arrested?
It doesn't matter.
Which side of the prison should you be put on? The male side or the female side?
Where you are safe, and if prisons are unsafe because they are putting people together that are unsafe with each other, they should fix that.
We should fix that. But in the meantime, while we do have prisons the way that they are, I don't think that we should be putting males in the female prison. I think they should be sex segregated instead of gender segregated.
I think they should be segregated for their safety and allowed to interact through appropriate barriers. This whole question of which it doesn't matter anymore. When you go to the hospital, do you need to have a gender segregated ward? No. You've got people of they're in hospital beds. You're treating them the same.
Are the trans people
The people.
going to
There's no
go with
distinction
the
at this point. This isn't about trans. This isn't
so the
trans.
male and the female population can
All the
intermingle?
people. All the people may intermingle through appropriate security barriers. They can't get to the other side of that transparent wall.
So is every person going to be in their own cell separated? Or
as needed, yes. And those people that can prove that they are safe in a more mixed population can apply for and qualify for that privilege. Coitus Review Board. Obviously, this is rife for lots of abuse. But let me start by putting it in place, and then let's tune it. But
what are you going to do about a woman who gets pregnant in prison?
Yeah, so they get pregnant. What next?
But then what happens when they give birth?
That's probably a ward of the state thing. So therefore, if you're going to allow it, you probably want to include contraception in the plan.
So birth control fails.
We take that risk. We have done due diligence to mitigate the risk, and we will take
Okay.
the additional risk. We have plenty of room for extra babies that mamas can't take care of this year.
Women who are in prison who have a baby, the baby should be taken from them.
They can't keep a baby in prison.
Some prisons do that.
Then I'm all in favor. Absolutely. If there's a mother and a baby and they can be imprisoned, take care of society's needs for protecting society and whatever reason society has put them there, while allowing them to take care of their child in a way that's healthy for the child, I'm all for it. I don't want to take away their human rights that I don't have to. Imprisonment is a terrible, terrible, apparently lesser of all evils that we use constantly. I mean, and to be clear, the U.S. imprisons a greater fraction of its population than any other first world nation.
We are no longer number one.
Fantastic.
I think that we should just have prisons that are male and female. I don't think we should have male guards watching females, and I don't think we should have female guards watching males. It should be totally separate. Prisoners can't consent. They can't consent to guards, and they can't consent to other prisoners. So ideally, there wouldn't be any sex happening at all, and there would have to be more safeguards in the male
my
prison.
ideals on this are completely opposed. So thanks.
Yeah,
we know we disagree. And let's go
the
back
less
to trans,
sex,
because,
the
because
better. Well, we do have the problem where there are prisons that are placing M to F, some of whom still have their male functionality in their sperm, going into female prisons and impregnating females.
they should fix that. They shouldn't have.
So you're against that?
I'm extremely clear that I want prisoners to not be able to, in an uncontrolled way, impregnate or rape each other. I don't know how I can be more clear about that. I'm willing to overhaul the entire prison system and potentially make it cost more. I don't think it would cost more, but I am willing to make it cost twice as much to get to my goal of prison risk rape, not some funny joke anymore.
But I think that our current zeitgeist of we have to totally change society for the good of this very small population of trans people and bend over backwards and make accommodations for them, even so far as giving them access to victims in prisons, is really bad.
Yeah.
But the problem with coercive government is that they say you can't have your thing, you have to do it our way. Like, for example, in my city, it's illegal to discriminate against trans people.
Right.
And so a single sex space is illegal in my city.
Right. It's illegal if supported by government money.
Even private businesses.
Okay. If it's a business that's providing services to the public under the business license of normal public stuff, yes, that we provide equal commerce opportunity to all people, regardless of their status in these protected groups. That's a law of the land.
I would like there to be able to be a gym that says this is the male locker room, this is the female locker room. If you have a penis, you are not allowed to go in the female locker room.
Those are called private gyms.
I think that a private business should be able to do what they want. I don't see gender on a spectrum. I see gender as the binary that matches with sex. There is a spectrum of masculine and feminine.
Yes.
And people can live on a spectrum anywhere on there, and it has nothing to do with whether they are a male, female, man, or a woman.
Nope. It absolutely has something to do with it. The difference that you are concerned about is that difference. It's how society matches the behaviors with their expectations, and how some people are very disturbed when that is not matched, and they see fraud, and they see deception, and they see threat.
They do have something to do with each other. You can be a feminine man, and you can be a masculine woman, and it doesn't change your sex. You still are the sex that you are.
Absolutely.
Not fulfilling your gender role, your stereotypical gender role, to me does not make you any less of a man or a woman.
Right, because you're only looking at sex.
Right.
So let's take the word man and woman completely out of it. Try to avoid those terms entirely, and pick the term that describes those people who aren't cis. And I just mean cis in that they fit with your natural expectations traditionally. And now let's try to humanize those people.
In those gender non-conforming person.
Okay, so gender non-conforming people.
Right.
So I have gender non-conforming friends. to a degree. I'm gender non-conforming myself. I estimate about 20%.
I have a wide range of tolerance in gender non-conforming.
Good. If they did not adopt the word woman, do you have any objections to anything else they're doing?
As long as women are still allowed to have their female-only safe spaces, their sports. I don't like the anti-discrimination laws. I don't want them to try to go into female-only spaces.
Okay.
Bathrooms, locker rooms, any such spaces.
Where should they go? With the architecture that we have now, what should my friend do when they need to pee and there's only
Use the
the
men's
two
room.
available?
Use the men's room.
Fuck you. Seriously. Tell you to use the men's room because you don't look feminine enough to me. I'm playing, okay? Please don't take this personally. How dare you, who aren't pretty enough, come into our bathroom? Go use the men's room, you man-looking woman, you.
You know that clip from Mean Girls?
So that's against the rules, and you can't sit with us. Whatever. Those rules aren't real. You can't sit with us!
Okay. Why do you get to do that? Why do you think that that's okay?
Because society is more important than the individual.
Fuck you.
The majority is more important than the...
Yeah, you're a libertarian, and you're a bad libertarian, and you should not ever be saying something like society is more important than the freedom of the individual.
I get that a lot.
Yeah,
I'm a collectivist libertarian.
That is so inconsistent of you.
Actually, it's not, because I prescribe to the non-aggression principle. I do not want to do violence to anyone unless it's in self-defense in the strictest terms. Yeah. I want to be free to have spaces where I can have the social norms that I'm comfortable with. And I would prefer to be in spaces where males have to go to the male room and females can go in the female room. And if you have a penis, you are not allowed in the female only space.
Yeah.
That's what I'm comfortable with.
I hear you.
I understand
and
that other people don't like that.
And you just suck. You're just mean people. Seriously, that is so rude.
I'm so intolerant.
Yeah, you are. Anyway, thanks for owning it. Thanks for being proud of it.
I understand why society has gone down this road of being more and more nice and accepting and tolerant. Yeah. But there are consequences to that.
Nah, so at this point, I'm not interested in your boundaries.
That's a little rapey.
Yeah, neat.
Yeah.
Yeah. Look whose side is raising the stakes.
What do you mean?
It's called the transgender genocide. There are a lot of my trans friends who are very, very concerned about what you are doing.
I don't want to genocide anyone.
They think so. I don't agree with their terms, but I think you are far more in the wrong.
Michael Knowles said,
"Then for the good of society, and especially for the good of the poor people who have fallen prey to this confusion, transgenderism must be eradicated from public life entirely. The whole preposterous ideology."
People clipped that and said, oh, he wants to genocide trans people, that he meant the idea. But we separate the idea from the person.
Yeah.
And we say, we want these people to be living healthy, happy lives, but we want them to not be trans anymore.
Right.
We want to get rid of the idea that you can change your gender.
Yep.
We want to go back to the way things were before 8 years ago, where your sex is your gender and it can't be changed. Before 8 years ago, we didn't have legal and social acceptance of the idea that you could change your gender. Would you say that if all trans people just stopped being trans and they were healthy and happy, just imagine hypothetically.
No.
Would you call that a trans genocide?
No, just no. The hell are you talking about? Trans people not being trans anymore.
Imagine tomorrow.
No.
They come out with
I don't care.
A cure.
I don't know. It's not a disease. You don't need to cure it. They're not wrong. They're not broken. You're broken. Your society is broken. Your values are expressed inconsistently. The values that you express in one area lead to reasons that you should have a completely different conclusion in this area.
But social norms aren't violence.
Your kind of social norms are violence. When you pass laws for things and breaking those laws puts you in prison, that's violence.
I don't want to pass any laws against transgender.
Yes, you do.
But What law?
Everything that you've been talking about has been law.
What do you mean? I don't want them to be arrested unless they're attacking someone. I don't think nonviolent people should be arrested.
Perhaps I've misunderstood you that far.
I don't want to do anything to anybody. I just want to be left alone to have the social norms that I'm comfortable with.
Then why
I
do
want
you
to be
give a
able.
crap whether Jamie uses a women's restroom?
They should use the correct bathroom that aligns with their biological sex.
Yeah, okay. Rules like this will be enforced by people who take it upon themselves to be vigilantes. Okay?
Oh no.
If you put
Property
if you put
owners.
this rule in place, I don't care what the badges do. I care about what the people without badges do. They're 1,000 times more dangerous.
I think that it's up to the property owner. A lot of these stores, they have security. It's up to the property owner to decide what their rules are and how they
Now you've
enforce
just
it.
created a huge situation of public safety by having different standards in different places that are unwritten, that are unclear, and now the
Well,
trans
hopefully they would be
people
written.
are a lot more afraid of their life in a city that you're anywhere near.
You can do what you want in your city.
You are
San
violating
Francisco,
public safety by this standard.
public safety.
You're going to
for
get people
whom?
killed with that shit.
Get people killed how?
Because vigilantes will kill somebody if they think the rule is that they shouldn't be whatevering in whatever bathroom, and you're supporting that bullshit.
We haven't seen that happen a single time.
You are encouraging violence against trans people.
No, I'm not.
Yes, you
I'm
are.
explicitly
By
saying
setting
there
up
should not
those
be
rules
violence.
and encouraging people you know in your community that are packing, you
I
are
am not
starting a
trying-
war.
Come on now. I've seen the violence coming from the trans side. I've seen the Christian school get shot up and 3 children be shot by a trans person. This is becoming a hot war. And so far, there has not been one vigilante cis man or woman who has done violence to a trans woman for using the woman's bathroom or anything like that. Not a single instance of that vigilante justice. But we've seen it the other way.
And with that, summarize and close.
I had so many more bullet points to get through.
I'm sorry. I'm so very, very willing to have more of these, and hopefully you don't find my combative state so off-putting that you're not willing to try.
No, I'm down. I'm down to do this again. How do you want to wrap this up?
Is there a moral to this story? And I want to give you the last word to your audience.
I think that we can follow the non-aggression principle and not do violence to peaceful people and still have social norms that work for the majority and for society to function properly without being held hostage to the special needs of a small minority of highly volatile people.
I said I was going to give you the last word, so I'm just going to give you applause. That was well spoken, Bruce. Bye-bye.
Bye.
1 week later.
I have a list of questions for you.
Yes.
And I hope to have a good dialogue that remains civil and rational and logical. The first one is, can you sum up what you said last week about what it means to be trans?
Transgender refers to someone who's assigned at birth presentation or maybe their physical presentation doesn't align with the gender they prefer to express, and they want to make that alignment and have you treat them in the gender that they would express. And trans is a label that people put on themselves, and I think that's subjective, and we should allow that. And I also think we should treat everybody the same, regardless of sex, regardless of gender, except in the areas where it's reasonable and we have to. But legally, we should have no distinctions about sex or gender written into our laws, because we just treat everybody kindly and the same. So trans is an example where it's really difficult to do that because of these, crossing over people's prior boundaries, and where the lines really get blurry and messed up. And so it's really pushing us to look at, well, wait a second, why do we have these discriminations on public bathrooms? Why do we have a discrimination sign that discriminates this sex from this sex? Why can't we just have enough private bathrooms that you don't have to have a discrimination? You can simply say one human, one stall.
What do you mean by gender? And is it the same as that feminine, masculine spectrum that we talked about last week?
When I was born, sex and gender meant the same thing. And it really referred to everything that we now want to distinguish. Some of us do want to distinguish into sex and gender. Sex, for me, is the part that's immutable, the part that we share with other animals, the part that is absolutely male in my male to female trans friends, or absolutely female in my female to male trans friends. That's the sex part. And then the gender part is the socially constructed bit where we associate pants with men and skirts with women, or haircuts, or all the kind of things that we choose. Now, maybe these are traits that naturally fall to one side, but then we socially start to associate with them and say, well, no, if you're doing the trait that fits the other presentation, you're doing something different. And now we call that gender. So gender is what I'm calling all of the socially malleable traits that we associate with sex, which includes behaviors, modes of dress, presentation.
Is the outward expression of feminine or masculine just a style choice or something deeper?
Yes, it's very much a style choice to express. Now, the why we express it, that might be the deeper part.
It seems to be very much culturally dependent. If our society had different culture norms, what it means to be feminine or masculine would be a lot different.
Absolutely, yeah.
Last week, what I heard you say is that there's nothing wrong with trans people and they don't need a cure.
Right.
If that's true, then why do they need medical care in the form of medical transition?
If somebody wants to change something about their body and they can do so with acceptable risk profiles, which is to say maybe the benefits of the change are not worse than not making the change, then I'm all in favor of them doing that. Some people might get augmentation surgery just to change their appearance, and fine. I see it well within somebody's freedom. Whether I think that the risk benefit profile is good for me, I'm scared of surgery, so I don't want it. But I certainly wouldn't want to restrict somebody doing augmentation surgery or plastic surgery on their face, or getting a tattoo, or rings, or stretching, whatever. That's their freedom. I want that to be their freedom. I don't need it all for trans to be on the public dole. It's on their dime. I'm okay with that. I'm fine with trans people only being able to call this elective surgery.
I think I agree with everything you said so far.
Oh, good. Wow.
As we touched on last week, body dysphoria is having a bad feeling about your body and isn't necessarily a mental disorder. Body dysmorphia, however, is a mental disorder characterized by the obsessive idea that some aspect of one's own body part or appearance is severely flawed and therefore warrants exceptional measures to hide or fix it. Cognitive behavioral therapy, which is talk therapy that helps the patient think in a more helpful way, is recommended. For many people with body dysphoria, cosmetic surgery does not work to alleviate the symptoms, as their opinion of their appearance is not grounded in reality. It is recommended that cosmetic surgeons and psychiatrists work together in order to screen surgery patients to see if they have body dysmorphia, as the results of the surgery could be harmful to them. Why should we treat trans people that have body dysmorphia in regards to their sex/gender any differently than any other type of body dysmorphia?
I think that fits exactly with my understanding. I do really respect the nuance in that tone, that one of them is the normal, healthy coping, the reasonable, rational, proportional response, and one of them is a diluted, unproportional response, an overreaction, a misfiring. And in the case of that misfiring, you're saying that intervention has a low success rate. Yes. And I really hope that these kinds of things are in place regards transitioning. And my experience from my transitioning friends is that this is in place, even to the point of being a barrier, a checkbox that you have to really, really prove. That's over 3 decades, and it has gotten less so now, and I'm not well tuned into what it would be this year. I hope that we would treat all dysmorphia and dysphoria and go through the adult, careful, nuanced process of analysis with them to help them find out whether this is or isn't that thing, and then eventually leave it to their freedom, because our second guessing is no longer good enough reason in my mind to stop somebody getting a boob job, even if you think it'll make them look ugly. I also don't need that somebody have dysphoria in order to be trans. I don't need their reason. It's their freedom. I don't need a reason in order to trigger my empathy and my willingness to just cooperate with whatever anybody wants to do in their own expression.
Would you allow other types of body dysphoria sufferers to harm their physical healthy body?
Yes, absolutely. If somebody really, really dislikes the shape of their earlobes and wants to have them amputated, yes, by all means. If somebody has ugly parts of their body they want removed, changed, whatever, enhanced, yes, go right ahead. Obviously, all appropriate limits that apply to like surgical ethics and all that kind of thing apply. And then, yes, go ahead. Cosmetic yourself into what I would revolt from. This is in the sense of freedom means putting up with some stuff I really hate. And I only see any harm in this case being borne as a risk to the individual and not to anybody else. So their freedom to swing their fist even off the end of their arm is not restricted in my mind.
So that would include like the woman who wanted to blind herself or someone who wants to amputate a healthy limb.
Yes, those are extreme cases in which I do want to allow that freedom. It's weird to me, but it becomes down to that's an edge case that says, how much am I willing to stand by and allow something that is grotesque to me and revulsive and disgusting to me for someone else to do? And then I go to, well, I'm in favor of assisted suicide. So where am I going to draw the line shy of that? So no, yes, they're allowed.
Okay, that's logically consistent. Are trans adults capable of consenting, or does the fact that they want to change themselves by definition mean that they're not of sound mind?
I don't like the equivocation of saying that people who are not of your version of sound mind are incapable of consent. That is defining their consent out of existence and saying that it doesn't matter, that it's of zero weight.
So this would be an area of disagreement between us.
Cool.
Because I would be against suicide,
Okay.
assisted suicide, or letting someone that you know is suicidal to do it themselves. Because I would say that by definition, if you want to harm yourself, that you aren't of sound mind, and that somebody, hopefully next of kin and not the government, would be justified in using minimum necessary force to protect them from themselves and take guardianship over them like a parent does a child until they are of sound mind again and are able to resume.
And I would vote for things like moving toward more like the Oregon level of assisted suicide. If California had that to vote, I'd vote for it. But it's not something I want to campaign for much. It's not an important issue for me.
Why is it so important for trans people to use the women's bathroom?
Why is it so important that you have a women's bathroom? Just have a people's bathroom.
The reason why women want women-only bathrooms is because it's a vulnerable feeling place, and it's nice to have a space, whether it be a bathroom, locker room, it's more important in the locker room, a changing room, where there's an expectation that you're not going to have a male in there. And there's been cases of men hiding cameras.
Hold on. I don't need to have men's and women's dressing rooms. I just need dressing rooms.
Well, women would prefer to have women-only dressing rooms. Most women.
But if they're private, who cares?
Oh, we care.
I don't care about you care.
If you don't care about our preferences, why should we care about the preferences of trans people?
Because they're humans.
We're humans too. And single occupancy bathrooms are actually more dangerous because a woman can be caught off alone in there. While the situation with the stalls, it's safer. The less privacy is actually safer because there are more likely to be other people in there and to hear and to be able to see what's going on. The way that the bathrooms are designed right now is for a reason. A lot of us, I mean, I can't speak for all women, a lot of us would prefer to keep it that way. It's just curious that our preferences aren't accounted for, but we're supposed to account for the preferences of trans people, even though we can't even get an answer for why is this so important. Why does it elicit such an emotional response that suggests that females should be allowed to have female-only spaces?
You tell me. Why do you think people are pissed off at you?
I think because trans people, they feel gender euphoria when their gender is affirmed by other people, and they feel gender dysphoria when it's not. And so
I feel the euphoria part. I don't feel the dysphoria part. I feel euphoria when people recognize feminine components of me and praise them. I don't feel a dysphoria about the masculine parts, so I'm only a little in that. Please continue.
I think that that's why they get so upset when they're not welcome into women's spaces, because it's much more than comfort and safety for them. There's this other component of having their gender affirmed. Would you say that's true?
Oh, I don't actually even care to comment on your opinion about other people's motivations that are in your outgroup, I don't think that you are even close to proportional or correct, and nor do I think that you should even try to speak for them. I think you should ask them and quote. I think you're out of line to cast on their motivations, especially if it's for justification for your own argument.
You asked me.
Did I? No, I think you asked me.
I asked you, and in response, you asked me.
Completely unmoved by a reason that involves your casting a generalized impression of the motivations of a group that's your outgroup. Any answer that includes that just falls flat with me.
I'd be happy to talk to a trans person.
I'll perhaps arrange that. I'll find one that feels brave enough.
Do you think that privately owned businesses that are open to the public should have a right to decide what their policies are on their property?
Absolutely not, because I think there's a huge number of laws of the land that I want to apply on every property where I am permitted to go. I want certain level of protections and baselines, and that book is thicker than I care to read, so it is a non-trivial list. I want to restrict property owners from doing discriminatory things, even more than they are right now.
If store security have a policy of allowing obvious males in the women's locker room, changing room, do you think that might have adverse results for women's safety?
Stop with this trying to sort people at the door for their safety. It's sexist bullshit, assuming that because what if somebody's got in their pants is a strong indicator of whether or not they're going to commit a felony.
So you can't imagine adverse results for women's safety?
I'm not okay with the idea of this women's locker room thing to begin with. So you're asking me what's my policy, what am I voting for? Stop having places like that.
Should it be illegal? And what should the punishment be for a business owner that doesn't allow males to use the women's spaces?
I've addressed this. You keep picking on something that I'm past. I have a different solution that I want, and I don't like your nitpicking back here on something that I say is a problem that's not mostly about trans. It's about human rights in general.
You think it's a human rights issue to have a women's locker room?
I think it's a human rights issue to not have to get naked in front of other people.
Nobody has to.
Right, so stop having those.
What if people want to?
Then go ahead and make it your private club. Don't make it open to the public.
Can you explain what you mean by a private club?
Yeah, if I go rent a hot tub room for a party, that's my private club. I get to decide who gets to come to the party. If I start putting up banners and posters and say, come to my party, now I'm not allowed to say, come to my party as long as you are redheaded and blue-eyed.
So the difference is advertising?
If I'm inviting the public versus individually inviting my friends, that's the difference between private and public.
Imagine a gym opens up and they have a women's locker room and they say males are not allowed to go into this women's locker room. What punishment do you think that they should have?
I'm done. You've hit me up. Now we've gone more than 3 times you've asked this question. Please move on. I've answered it as much as I'm going to talk about it.
I guess I'm kind of confused because you said you want it to be illegal, but all laws have to have punishments. So we need to know what the punishment should be. And I would say it's a violation of our rights to tell us that it should be illegal to have women-only spaces.
I would like to terminate it now. I think we are no longer making any progress toward understanding, and now I believe you're badgering me on a question, which I'm saying I want to move past. So
I wasn't asking you a question. I was telling you my opinion.
Do you have any summary? I'm demonstrating a graceful rapport exit. This is me leaving and giving you the last word. Do you have any summary that you'd like to leave with your audience that I'll not get in the way of?
I think this is an excellent demonstration of how the trans ideology makes no sense and doesn't actually believe in freedom at all, and is about oppression of women and is fundamentally sexist and bigoted at its core. And it's fundamentally hating of women and putting the needs of males who want to be seen as women above the safety and comfort of real women.
Thank you for making your case so clearly.
Thanks for coming on.
See you later.
Bye.